good morning. Happy Friday. I say this on all my live videos that I hate when people say happy day, whatever day it is, and I literally say it every single live broadcast or when I'm making a video. So that's just going to be my thing. Happy Friday. My name is Amy Kochek with Amy Kochek Creative, and today we're doing another extraordinary story with an extraordinary person. I always start with saying why we're doing what we're doing and what this is about. I'm a ghostwriter. I'm a coach. I'm a speaker. And one of the main things that drives me and keeps me doing what I'm doing is I believe in the power of people's stories. It is what connects us. First of all, our stories are the ones that help us, that when we're telling our story, it's the most powerful thing that we have. It's our most powerful asset. It's what gives us clarity. It's what gives us wisdom, our experiences. All of those things mixed up together are where we receive our direction from life. So our story is the most powerful asset that we have. And then when we share our story, it's a way for us to connect to other humans. It's a way for us to bring healing to other people because that's what impacts us. Other people's stories change us. They motivate us. They're very powerful. So in an effort to try to share as many stories as I can, I am soliciting the help of extraordinary people that I know. And I know sometimes it's hard for us to embrace the fact that we're extraordinary. Some of us just think, well, I'm just ordinary. But every person has an extraordinary story, which makes you an extraordinary person. There's nobody on this earth that is like you, that has your DNA, your experiences, your story. So you are extraordinary. So today, my guest, who is one of my extraordinary people, is Sarah Kreuz. I'm so excited. I actually met Sarah on Instagram. She has an amazing Instagram page called Spiritual Hacks, and she shares all things spiritual. And she does, I remember when I first came across her page, she does like just some of her Instagram stories were just so simple. Like she would get on and say, today, I just want you to not overthink. And it was just a simple concept, but the way that she's able to communicate that through her own story, her own experiences, and her wisdom was just so powerful. So I knew I had to connect with her and have her share her story with you. So excited. Sarah, I'm going to pass it to you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and any other relevant information you want to share with us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as you mentioned, my name's Sarah. I would first and foremost, like, I feel like I am an intuitive, like, even though I go back and forth between perhaps doing like intuitive readings, I feel like that is one thing that I for sure am. And if you're not entirely sure what that is, I essentially can read people's chakras. So I get an understanding of where they are at on not just like a spiritual level, but an energetic level. And I can tap into what kind of energy they're holding on to in their body. And I feel like me being an empath, I'm just generally super sensitive to that. So I channel that energy in different ways. Like I do writing, I do artwork, and I'm essentially just, my mission is to expose my soul and to help other people do the same in whatever method that may be.
Can you explain chakras? Because I know not everybody knows what chakras are.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So chakras are energetic points in your body. So we essentially have 7 main chakras. And so, for example, if you are holding any kind of like emotional stress or heavy emotions, those are going to be located at a specific area in your body, as opposed to if you're maybe holding on. So if this is about storytelling, if you find that you are not, like, it's hard for you to tell people your truth, your story, express yourself, then that could be an energetic blockage in your throat chakra, which has to do with telling the truth and expressing yourself.
Okay.
So like every kind of thing in life can be rooted back to an energetic point in your body, which are the chakras.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, so before we get into like the more specifics of what you do with your intuitive, I call them powers, but your intuition, take us to the point of your life that things kind of started to shift for you, where you had a specific idea of where you were going and what you were doing, but something shifted. What was the pivotal moment that caused the shift? But before you get to the pivotal moment, set us up. What are you doing? Where are you at? What's going on in your mind? And then take us up into that pivotal moment.
Okay, I feel like, okay, so there was one pivotal moment, but before that, I felt like I was always leading towards a pivotal moment, but I thought it was a pivotal moment, but it actually wasn't. So for example, when I decided to randomly move, like one of those things where you're like being called to go somewhere, like I felt the pull to go to Portland, Oregon. So I moved there, right? And this whole idea in my head was like, oh, once I get to Portland, I'm gonna be happy. Once I get to Portland, I'm gonna fit in. Like once I get to Portland, like that's it. Like I figured out life. Apparently, that's what I thought for some reason, right? Mm-hmm. And then it turned out, like looking back, Portland was a time of, it was like basically a year of just feeling depressed, anxious, lost, alone. And I just remember essentially just being in that state of just feeling so incredibly lost and defeated and depressed and whatever else I was, that I just remember thinking like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Like maybe I'm doing something wrong. Like I'm back in this exact same like emotional state that I thought I left like 3 years ago. So maybe something has to change, right? Like it's obviously not my external world. Like I was running away from myself. Yeah. And I realized that like if I'm ever going to change and I'm going to move out of like, you know, this depressive state and this anxiety and these panic attacks, like I have to stop running away from myself. So that's when I made the decision to essentially just like, people say like face your demons, like do your shadow work or whatever. That's when I decided that like I'm just going to face the truth that lives within me, no matter how painful it is, because avoiding it my whole life has been equally as painful. So yeah. That's what I decided to. I just said screw it. I was like, I'm gonna leave the country. I'm going to start a podcast, and I'm just not gonna really care anymore what people like, how they react to what I say, because it like I can't hold it in anymore.
What was life like before that? Because I know you mentioned depression, anxiety, panic attacks. How much did those three things control your existence and who you were?
I would say they controlled my existence a lot. Like as a writer, I know it's so stereotypical, but I always associated my writing to like my depression, but yeah. Also like my on and off like existential crises. So there was a point where like I didn't think I knew my creative self beyond depression, because that's all I had experienced my whole life. And then it was definitely affecting my everyday life, because for a while I was in a cycle of feeling depressed and then getting anxious and then binge drinking and then waking up depressed or anxious and then trying to like cover it up again with alcohol. So it was just like this whole cycle. And I was just like in these like drinking cycles, and then in these cycles of like continuously choosing like crappy men to date. Like it was just a whole, like I was just in this cycle over and over and over again. And I was like, something has to give. Yeah. Like,
what did you feel was the truth inside that you were running from? What was the truth that you were avoiding?
I feel like a lot of the truth that I was avoiding were the emotions that I hadn't necessarily processed. Mm-hmm. So for example, one thing I realized that I was holding inside of me is that I actually never processed like grieving my grandparents dying when I was like 7 and 10. Like, yeah. And that started coming up, and I was like, what? Like, whoa, like this is like 20 years later, and I'm like still crying about this. And I realized I was just like pushing stuff down. And then also I feel like another thing I feel like that was depressing was like growing up, there was a bit of abuse in my house. So I just had like flashbacks of just like my mom getting slapped in the face like over and over and over again. And I was like, normally I would just like ignore it and just like try to press it down. But I was like, I need to face this. And then ever since I faced stuff like that I didn't want to face within me, that's when it didn't affect me so much. Then I wasn't having such a reaction to it every time.
Yeah. So you decided to do a podcast, which I listened to. What's the podcast called again? I forgot what it's called.
Art of the Unknown.
Art of the Unknown. I listened to it while walking. I listened to almost, I think, 5 episodes in a row while I was walking the beach. So make sure that you check it out, Art of the Unknown. It's a really great podcast. But you're doing the podcast, and where are you living at the time out of the country?
Oh, so I was living the first few months, I went to Turkey. I went to Israel for a little bit. I lived in Spain for 6 months. I visited other countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Ireland, just because like it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, universe, this is the test. Guide me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm literally giving everything to you. So make it happen because here I am.
Uh-huh. So what was the change point? What was the point where you realized that your life was shifting?
Oh, geez, where I feel like my life was shifting. I mean, there was a lot of subtle shifts that I noticed. Like I was actually I was having more difficult conversations around the fact that like of what I was feeling emotionally and like what was making me angry, because that was an emotion that I suppressed a lot of my life. But I realized that things had shifted. I want to say, I mean, there's a lot of shifts on a spiritual level, but like when you're traveling and you're in your own little zone, like, yeah, like you can feel and experience all these shifts, but it's like you don't know how much you've shifted until you've gone back home.
Yeah.
Back in the chaos that you were trying to leave. So I think once I came back home, like I was honestly afraid to be like, oh, I'm going to go back to the same person. I'm going to go back to the same situation. Like, I don't want to do this. But I think upon me coming back, that's when I realized like how much I had changed and how much I'm not letting things affect me and how much actually happier and more love I have to give.
So I've heard people say this before, that like leaving the country changes you. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that like leaving the country and traveling like you did, how was that such a changing point for you? What about being out of the country was so pivotal and powerful for you?
That's a good question. So it's hard to say because part of me doesn't actually believe that leaving the country is going to solve anything.
Yeah.
Because I've done a few trips outside the country, and my first few ones were essentially the same thing. Like I was running from myself. Like I was using travel as an excuse and as a cover up to face myself. But I think if you are going to travel and you're going to do it in a way that's more beneficial, I would say that the reason travel does help and like does change the perspective of things is that, well, for me, it's a lot like when I'm completely out of my comfort zone, like that's when I feel like inspiration just like flows my way. So it's a lot of beliefs about life getting shattered, but then also having this inspiration just flow to you and just wanting to write and create and express and just live in the moment and be. But I don't know if that's actually just because I'm traveling or because like it's my mindset. So like it could go either way, I feel.
Yeah. So when you came back to the States and realized that you had changed, how does this then change your journey?
Mm-hmm. Like my physical journey or my path? Okay. So it's really ironic that like I'm living now essentially like right on the same block that I grew up on, which is funny because I'd spent a lot of my life trying to leave and get out of here. And then I wind up being right back to where I started. But it's funny because all of this time I spent trying to like run away, and I had this idea of like who I was in my head. I feel like I realized that the thing I want is just to feel like I'm at home, like just to feel like I am safe and secure, and like I don't have to like travel across the world and like, you know, space to find what I'm looking for, which I know it sounds kind of uh like generic, but like I feel like I didn't know what I never had a sense of home like or safety growing up. So for me to find this and to find it here, I feel like is something that I would never expected. But
Yeah.
I mean, looking outside, it could be like, you know, what are you talking about? Like you just have an apartment. Like
Yeah.
why is it a big deal?
So how did you find that? How did you find that sense of home where you're at right now?
I feel like I just realized that, well, one, I'm pretty particular about how things look, but I also like creating beauty. So like when I am able to like have my little own creative space and know that like no one's gonna be busting through the door and like gonna disturb it, like to me that just feels like I'm at home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like something I've never had before either, because I've also like spent a long time like, you know, running rooms, like moving a lot. So it wasn't ever like, oh, like this is what being at home feels like. Like I'm like, wow, I can like, you know, put up paintings and like have furniture for the first time that I actually bought.
Yeah, unpack your suitcase for the first time, all of it, and put it in storage.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like the what you've learned in your, and I think one of the things that I think really resonates with me and probably with a lot of other people is that a lot of times in our pivotal journey or the like a moment of shift for us is when we stop running from what's within, and really start realizing latent emotions and things that we've pushed down, and we really start dealing with those things, that's kind of when life starts to open up in a different way. So after you experienced that and started to really go do like a lot of deep inner work, how did that kind of give you direction for how you then take that and service humanity with the work that you've done within? Like how do you use that experience and that shift in your life to now impact humanity?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Um, so I would say that like I feel like what I've had to say hasn't necessarily changed that much, but I feel like what did change is having like the actual um I don't know if courage is the right word, but to like actually put it out there. Like there was always this block between like I've always written stuff, and it's funny, like I'll find journals that I wrote a while ago and I'm like, wow, I like write the exact same way. Like nothing has changed.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's actually me being like okay with the fact of just putting it out there. And it's it's funny because like I feel like I have to keep on learning. I have to relearn how to keep on being vulnerable and keep on putting it out there. Like I felt like, oh, I did it once, I can do it again. But then I realized like if you take a break and then you try to do it again, it's like, oh crap, like this is actually scary again.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like this whole shift has also made me realize that, or has me realize that we're so incredibly similar. And I'm sick of people not essentially just telling the truth about where they're at. Like, I feel like the truth has become such like a huge, like, again, like truth, the throat chopper, like I'm all about like expressing. Mm-hmm. So I feel like part of my, cause like, if like, I feel like if there's something going on inside of me, like I feel like it's almost my duty to like spill it out because I know people are gonna relate. Mm-hmm. And it would be kind of like almost selfish to keep it in just because I'm scared.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? I don't know.
100%. Yeah. You talked about the power that you have with intuition, or the powers to makes it sound like it's mystical. The gift of intuition that you have. How do you use that for yourself? And then how do you use that for other people, the strength of your intuition?
Yeah. So I almost kind of feel like, well, when I'm writing and when I'm trying to like put stuff out there, um, I don't think people realize almost how painful it is. Like they'll read something I write and they're like, "Oh, that's so nice," and that's like, great. But then, like as I'm writing it, sometimes I'm crying, and sometimes I'm just like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like tapping into like not just my intuitive self, but I can also do that and connect and kind of gain a perspective on what someone else is feeling. So I feel like when I can like connect on myself on a deep level and then understand and empathize with someone else, that's when the communication opens up. So I feel like that's probably, I want to say, one of the ways that I that I do help a little bit, but I also want to help more, is just widening people's perspective about not just themselves, but maybe what they're going through, and realizing that like what they're thinking and what they're feeling is not, it may be sometimes the absolute truth to them, but it's not where they're forever going to be. And I want to kind of just like keep on breaking these beliefs and these cycles that we're in, because like it's not getting us anywhere good or productive. And I don't know what my work is going to look like in a few years or in 5 or 10 years, but I feel like as long as I just keep having my voice and just keep, spitting some truth, I feel like it's gonna land on the right people. You know what I mean? I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
I feel like my job is to just keep expressing myself and to keep writing and creating and let it out into the universe, and then it takes it from there.
Yeah. How important do you feel like intuition was in going on your journey, and why do you feel like so many people ignore that part of themselves or don't develop it?
Yeah. So when I was traveling, like that's all I relied on was my intuition. Like that was my goal. That was me being like, okay, like I'm going to like test give this puppy a ride right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really important because it led me to the countries that I went to. It dictated like what places I stayed at, like where I went on everyday basis, and I feel like I heard this really good explanation. I forgot who it was by, but they said that like when we grow up and we're like, even if we have the greatest parents in the world, like if we're constantly being told that like, oh no, we should do things this way, or for a great example that I heard was like, oh, if you're a kid and your intuition is telling you that like you want to stay away from like your creepy uncle, and like that's what you feel, but then your parents are like, oh, give your uncle a hug, like that is like the world almost kind of butting heads with your intuition, and then over and over again, it's like you don't know who to trust. You don't know if you trust your intuition, if you trust the world. And I feel like that happens like to everybody in a certain way, and it's just a matter of, I guess, trusting yourself. Like that, I think that's a huge thing. That's hard to do sometimes because we sometimes have like this messed up perception of like, all of our errors and our faults and our mistakes. So we're like, oh, how could I trust myself? But it's like, who else can you trust?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like either I'm trusting myself or I'm trusting like, the guy over there who is way more emotionally repressed than I am.
Right.
So
Yeah, I love that. Damn, what was my next question? I had it right in my head too, and then it just left right when I opened my mouth. Yeah, what was I gonna say?
the last one was about intuition, and then
I lost it. I lost it. It'll probably come back to me. Oh no, I remember. Okay, so in the shift that you had, what do you think was like the greatest revelation about yourself that you received? What was this like amazing revelation that you received about yourself?
So let me think about that. I think that when it's hard to say. I don't feel like it was a revelation. I feel like it was not like in a sense of like something that I thought.
Yeah.
I feel like it was more of like what I was experiencing and like being so like connected to myself and just feeling happy and feeling like I had a purpose and that like I was no longer lost and depressed. Like I feel like that was the shift of being like, whoa, like these things are possible in life. Like who would have thought, right?
Right.
It was like the shift of like realizing that I can be happy, but then it was on the flip side, it was like realizing like, oh shit, like I had to learn how to be happy again.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like a habit. I had been in the habit of being unhappy. So now I have to create the habit of being happy. But I feel like during that time, it was like awakening to see how much possibility there was, not just something that I could experience, but just for life in general, like what I can create and what I can do. Like I felt like at some points I felt limitless, which is like, I guess when people say like tapping into your potential, and I was like, whoa, I have a potential.
Yeah.
Trippy.
So, in your work now that you do with people, because I know you said you do Reiki healings, what work do you do with people that kind of helps them get to the point that you got to in your life?
Yeah, so I feel like what's more so coming up is I've done like personal, okay, so I've done intuitive readings, I've done Reiki, I've done coaching, and I feel like what is coming up is I am learning I want to start doing more writing prompts and helping people be able to reflect on themselves and really dive deep, because I feel like that's out of everything I've done. It's like I didn't realize how many other people were emotionally unaware. Like I thought I was the only one, and then realizing that like it's actually a thing, and I'm like, whoa. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I'm not here to like tell people like what they should do or what they should think or like whatever. I'm just honestly trying to let people know that like whatever they want or whatever they're trying to do, like I essentially want to help empower people's souls. Yeah. So if I can like help them see something about themselves that they couldn't see by themselves, then I feel like my job is done. And I feel like coming up, it's going to be, I've done journal prompts before for people. But I feel like that's I think going to be my main focus, because I want to obviously journal more and then help people do it. And I also feel like people have responded well to the journaling prompts before. So I feel like that's something I really want to focus on.
Yeah. Me and you totally sync with that, because that is essentially like when I'm doing, when I'm ghostwriting a book for somebody or just coaching somebody through the writing process, when I do the ghostwriting, I give the authors, I give them talking points, and they take their phone and they have to record into them. And I get back like raw, emotion-packed responses, right? And then I'll hear from the authors and they'll say, I didn't even realize that I still felt that way. Or I didn't even realize I felt that way. But as I was stream of consciousness talking or writing, it just came up. And that's why I say, like, your story is the most powerful thing that you possess. All the answers are there. It's just sometimes we don't know how to tap into it, or we avoid it. We don't go back into it. So I think you're on the right track, because there's so much going on with mental health awareness and people really trying to do deep inner work. And I think for so long, we've looked for secondary sources. Like we've looked to people or organizations or other books. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but it's like that should be secondary to what is found within, because what's found within is directly connected to who you are and what you're meant to accomplish. So I think that you're on the right path. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so 2 more questions. So I want you to speak directly to somebody who may be watching, who may be in a similar situation of feeling stuck or suffering from a lot of mental health issues that they don't know how to get out of, or trying to find their authentic self, somewhere along that spectrum. What would be 1 to 2 pieces of advice that you would give them, or just a piece of encouragement that you would give them to help them through that?
Mm-hmm. I feel like another message that I really try to convey to people is that the one that you are not alone. And I feel like that's also really powerful, because when you're in that state of, you know, depression or anxiety or whatever else you're going through, it's like you can feel like you're so lost and disconnected and really just like in this big, dark, black abyss that you're just floating through. So I feel like letting people know that, like, I feel like it's our suffering that also connects us. Like, if I can tell you what I've experienced, and then that, I feel like, let's just let you know that you're not alone. And if you're feeling like that, I would also encourage you to find a way to express that. Like, you don't have, like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, like, if you're having problems, like, call this number. It's like, no, like, if you have, or some people should, but like, if you're having problems, like, maybe step out of your comfort zone a little bit and actually tell one of your friends, as opposed to thinking that you're a freaking burden to them. You know what I mean? Or posting how you actually feel on social media and not caring what anyone thinks. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different ways that you can, like, step out of your cycle and your patterns just a little bit. And then I feel like if you are just going to push past that a little bit, you're going to see that it's not as scary to tell people or to be open or to express yourself in some way, like, heaven forbid, right?
Yeah.
And you're not taking up space, like, or wait, I don't know. Okay, never mind. Wait, that probably came out wrong. Like, you are taking up space, but people think they don't want to take up space, or they shouldn't take up space. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like,
right. You don't want to be a burden, so you won't say anything.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so what? Be a burden. Like, even if you feel like you're a burden, like, so what? Like, you need things too. You're a human. You put up with so many other freaking burdens of other people. Like, it's fine. Like, it's cool.
Yeah, I love that. So last thing, how can people get in contact with you to learn about what you do?
I'm most active on my Instagram account, which is Spiritual Hacks, and then my website, which I put up, like, my opt-ins and stuff. Like, I have like, I create new moon rituals. I have a full moon ritual up there, top 10 spiritual practices. Then I'm also put my journal prompts up there. So that's my website at sarahkreuz.co. And I should probably spell my last name. So it's Sarah with an H, and then Kreuz is KREUZ.co. Yes, it's German.
Yeah. We're going to put it in the comments, and then it'll also be in the description when it goes on YouTube. So they'll have the opportunity to connect with you there. Sarah, any final words that you would like to share?
Yeah. I feel like if something is scaring you, or if there's something you don't want to do, or there's like a truth you don't want to face within yourself, like, that's an indicator that you should go that direction. And probably going to, like, it's not going to feel comfortable, and it's probably going to suck. But if that's what your soul is calling, like, it's not going to stop until you do it. Yeah. So that was probably a harsh truth, but you know what?
That was a good one. We needed to hear it, Sarah.
Yeah, I was in mama mode.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. And as I always say, like, this is a conversation that does not have to end here. The purpose of these is just to connect us on a human level. So contact her, look at her Instagram, go to her website, and get in contact with her to see what she does, because she's making a huge impact on people's lives, and we are so appreciative. So
thank you, Amy.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful Friday. And